Success is always on the opposite side of adversity, not on the front side of it.
What's shaking? Welcome back to the All In Podcast. I'm your host, Rick Jordan. And today I have an amazing dude who's an avid business founder and acquisition investor. I'm really excited to talk to him because I'm in acquisition mode right now. He disrupts the status quo and creates cultural shifts. Not only that, he's a regular contributor on Forbes, Entrepreneur, CNBC, and other top-line publications. He and his wife, Jessica, have more than 50 companies in their ecosystem, and he's a guitar guy like me, former renegade musician. Matt Mead, welcome to the show, brother.
Thanks, Jordan. How are you?
I'm good. I'm really good. I'm pumped today because you've got an interesting trek, and I would love to take like a step through Matt Mead's life. Is that cool?
Let's do it.
Awesome, man. So there's some things that stuck.
And
go
real
for
quick,
it.
Sorry. Obviously, I just called you Jordan, but I meant Rick.
Dude, it's what my gym teacher used to call me. It's cool.
Yeah. No worries. Around here, I tend to call everybody by their last name, and it's just habit.
Yeah, man. That's okay. I'm the dude that has like two first names anyway, so it's cool. It works out. Yeah, right on. So something that stuck out, because I've got like an order that I was thinking of here. We'll see if we actually follow that order, right? If we get pulled off track a little bit. But this was
I've yet to be on a podcast where we followed the order.
I know, right? So. Great. Let's have fun. So this was interesting to me. This is really like where you kind of like launch things. You had a printing business, right? And then somehow fell into a Mexican food restaurant.
Sure.
Dude, that's just crazy. What happened with that?
My wife and I, so I had to go back in time quite a ways, but some 25 years ago, I went to, I left home at an early age. I was 2 months shy of my 17th birthday, spent about a year and a half homeless. After leaving home, managed to work my way into, 3 jobs. Once I got out of that situation, I was at my 3rd job, which was working as a bar back. A gentleman by the name of Peter Klingenberg came in. We struck up a conversation, and he said, "Kid, if you can talk to anybody the way that you're talking to me, I can teach you sales and it'll change your life." And he said, "There's just one problem. I'm here for one night. I'm passing through. If you want to learn, pack a bag and be at my hotel at 8 a.m. tomorrow morning, and you can get in the car and come with me and I'll teach you sales." And I went home that night. I knew that opportunities like this didn't happen very often. And I just believed him. There was just something about, he was the epitome of a salesman. So, but he closed without closing. Right. And so I went home, gave everything I had to my roommates, packed a bag, 8 a.m. the next morning. I'm at the hotel waiting. He said, "Get in, let's go." For the next, I worked for him for almost 2 years, year and a half, 2 years. And he was in the printing and publishing business. This is how we ended up in the printing and publishing business. And so he sold real estate relocation newcomer guides for Chamber of Commerce's. So the Chamber of Commerce has a welcome to our city type guide. He printed, designed, published those magazines, and those magazines are sponsored by advertising. And so Pete was the epitome of a tough love mentor. I really don't even look at it from a standpoint of mentorship. I was an apprentice, right? I worked for free. I carried his bags. I did whatever the guy asked. And if I didn't make enough in sales, he'd literally drop me off at one end of the town and pick me up at the other. And he'd tell me, "Hey, listen, if you don't write $5,000 between here and here, you sleep in the car. You don't make enough for a hotel room." And so I slept in that car for like 7 months. But what Pete did that was amazing for me was every day he'd say, "Okay, well, you didn't make enough. Give me every objection that you had." And I'd tell him, "Okay, well, here, I was talking to this lady, I did this, and he'd say, "Okay, here's how you overcome that." And it took 6 months of him just drilling it into my mind. But ultimately, we reached a place where I was able to exceed the threshold, start staying in a hotel room, and then ultimately continue to go. And I road warriored it with him for the better part of 2 years. He went through a divorce. Things went south. He tried to keep it afloat, and he wasn't able to. And So he came to me and he said, listen, I know I owe you $5,000, which think back 25 years ago, $5,000 was a substantial amount of money for a young man. And he said, I can't pay you. So here's a Mac Performa 525 in my client list. You know what to do. You're in business for yourself now. And so that was kind of the start of how I ended up in the printing and the publishing business. I just went and fulfilled contracts that were already in place. And somewhere along the way, I met my beautiful wife and managed to convince her to come to work with me. To leave her job over at Frost Bank and come to work with me. And I always laugh because the day she came to work for me, she walked in, she said, honey, do you know the difference between gross and net? And I said, I don't know. What do you mean? What are you talking about? And she said, well, do you know what a P&L is? And I was like, I don't know. Is that some sort of sex game or something? Like, I don't know. I'm like, that's an M, P&L. I don't know. What's a P&L?
Put that in the show notes. Like, P&L is a sex game, please. Yeah.
Yes. And she said, babe, you're literally the poorest person I know. You told me you were making all this money. I was like, I'm making $60,000 a year. What are you talking about? She goes, yeah. And by the time you're done, you're living off of 8, So, and 25 years ago, $60,000 was executive level salary. Right. So nonetheless, so she came on board. We built and grew that to, millions a year and publishing 28 different magazines annually or biannually. And it was good. And then we've always, I was very fortunate. My wife is a very entrepreneurial mindseted woman, meaning that she's successful in her own right. She has her own thing. I think you've spoken to her before. And so it's really interesting, the kind of the journey that we've been on. I would build something and I would get it to a certain level. And she had this instinctive way of knowing when I was getting bored, when it had kind of run its course. And so she would come to me and she would say, babe, look what you did. I'm so proud of you. You're the man. You did it. You took us from 200 to 400, from 400 to 600. But is this it?
Dude.
Is this the limit of our potential together? And I would, I'd go gorilla like anybody else. And why is it not enough? It's never enough. You're always pushing me. You don't know the stress I'm under. All of the normal. She'd just sit there calmly. She'd wait on me. And then I'd calm down. I'd be like, damn it, you're right. All right, well, you go figure out what to do with that business. You sell it, do whatever you're going to do with that. And I'm going to go build something. Go build it, babe. And we just had this very unique journey together where we've, triaged, incubated, accelerated, bought, sold, whatever you want to tag to it. Each one's a little bit different, but one of them ended up being a transition from the publishing business into the restaurant business. When we sold off the publishing company, we, how it is when you sell business, they buy the good accounts, they leave the bad accounts behind. So I was somewhat work optional, had a non-compete, in the particular vertical that we had spent so much of our time in. And we, I went around trying to collect all the money people owed me. And had this chain of Mexican restaurants that owed us 30, 40 grand, whatever it was. And the guy, had 3 locations. 2 of them were on valet parking and a 2-hour wait 7 days a week. And one of them was just dying on the vine. And he said, can I settle my debt by giving you a restaurant? And I'm like, well,
so unique.
I'm like, well, okay. Yeah, sure. Why not? And so I ended up in the restaurant business. And one night this lady calls and she says, if you look out your back door of your restaurant, that fence, right over that fence, that's my house. And I've got my 8 grandkids here and I have a Toyota Camry. And so I have no way. They want Mexican food. I have no way to get them all to you. Would you deliver me Mexican food? And remember, think back now. This is more than a decade ago. No Postmates, no Uber Eats, no anything.
No DoorDash.
Pizza or Chinese food. right, pizza or Chinese food, right? That was all you could get. And those were your delivery options. And so I said, ma'am, we're not built for it, whatever. She goes, listen, I'll give you a $20 tip if you will just figure it out. Oh, I've got styrofoam containers. I don't care. Package it any way you can. I got to feed these kids. I said, you know what, ma'am? Okay. Took an order. She ordered $100 worth of food, just over $100 worth of food.
That's a lot of Mexican food, bro.
She got 8 kids. She got 8 grandkids.
A lot of tacos.
That's a lot of Mexican food. Yeah. And so she ordered $100 worth of food. I package it up best we can. I take it around. I deliver it to her. She gives me $20 tip, just like she said she would. I come back and I get back and I go home that night and I say to my wife, somebody's missed the boat, because our average ticket was $32. And I just from start to finish of that order was 22 minutes. I was like, in 22 minutes, I just turned 3 tables. And so that led to us morphing from this dine-in scenario to a scenario where I created at that time, the very first Mexican delivery chain, took it all the way through franchise, hired the franchise group to come in and systemize it, took it and were voted franchise of the year that year, franchise opportunity of the year that year, opened up 6 locations, commissary kitchen, systemized the whole thing. And during that process, there was no software to actually run the modifiers, no POS. So I bought an old pizza software that had gone out of business. It was written in C++, learned C++, rewrote the whole thing. And ultimately that was what led to being able to systemize and organize the entire thing and make it replicatable. And then we got out of that business and moved on to a bunch more. So that's how we go from printing to Mexican restaurant.
That's incredible, man. I mean, the whole story.
To making millions.
Yeah, there was something that really stuck out at me. And I don't know if you've read this, but I'm in the middle of reading a book called The Way of the Superior Man right now. And
no, haven't read it.
When you were talking, I highly suggest it. Yeah, we'll put it in the show notes too for everyone listening and watching. But what you were talking about, when she would come up to you, when Jessica would come up to you and say, this is great, you got us from here to here, but is that all there is for us?
Yeah. Is that the limit of her line was always, is this the limit of our potential together?
Yeah. I love that.
Because, by the way, if it is, I'm okay with it. I'll live right here in this box with you because I love you. If this is it, I just feel like there's more for us.
Yeah, right on. And the book,
thank goodness she did,
dude.
Because I would have been, I'm a man without moderation, right? So I'm either to the extreme or I'm to the other extreme. I'll go one way or the other. And I very easily could have remained complacent in any one of those businesses, and just that would have been my life. But she saw more for us. So
that's awesome. There's parts in the book where it talks about a lot of men that don't have, and maybe this is going to turn into a guy show, I don't know, but a lot of men don't have. It even talks about, like, they dive into a lot of sports and all this other stuff because they literally don't have the balls to go out there and do it. But then, those are ones that might have a little bit more feminine qualities to them. But your wife, maybe without even realizing, because you talk about words of appreciation, right? The 5 love languages and all that stuff. And a lot of men will say that, I need words of appreciation, but the book is actually calling that out as BS. Because that's not what actually moves a man. It's great because she started saying, I'm proud of you. That's great. But then she immediately moved into challenging your masculinity, and that's what we, at least the men, right, actually respond to in those circumstances. For women that are listening, that we respond to that when we say, this is great, but what's the big deal with going after something else? Are you scared or something? And then we get to be like, hey, just like you said, and then we go after it even further, dude. That's awesome. It's a good book though, man, because that's the way to really approach a man and how we end up responding, how you approach a real masculine man anyways, in order to drive them forward as a partner. Because other times, the men that are happy with the day jobs and whatever else, which is fine, if that's what they feel like they want. But the ones that don't necessarily have the balls to go out there and grab what they really desire, their purpose in life, that's not going to resonate with those dudes. But it resonates with guys like us. It was like, okay, you tell me that, that you want me to go up 1 notch, whatever, I'll take it up 10. Take that.
It's very much the case as well. The latest deal that I just finished, where I'm sitting right now, and I'm not in my normal office environment because I'm sitting in in a Nissan and Volkswagen dealership. I just did a $20 million deal here in Stockton, California. It was a closed Nissan facility. And it was just that Nissan told me I didn't qualify, told me I couldn't be a Nissan franchisee. I'd never owned a Nissan dealership before. And I had not managed or run a Nissan dealership for 5 years. I'd not been to dealer school or anything else. It's like, oh, well, that's the wrong thing to tell me. So
tell me I can't again, please. One more time.
Yeah, please. So I promptly broke all records and opened a Nissan dealership in 45 days from the day I made the phone call and they told me I didn't qualify to the day we sold the first car at a closed location that had homeless people living in it. It was 75 days to the day, and exceeded all their expectations. And so, I think that there is definitely something about knowing and understanding what drives somebody. I love no as an example. I love being told no. I love the lessons behind no. I love when a deal unwinds on me, because those are the only thing. It's easy for me to close deals. I close deals all the time. I'm building businesses. I'm buying, doing things. When I lose a deal is when I learn the most. That's whenever I go back and I rethink and I retrace and, okay, how did we lose this deal? And I always start every deal the same way too. If you and I were doing a business transaction, first thing I'd ask you is, okay, tell me how we lose. How do we lose in this deal? Because if we can map a path to loss, then we can identify all the potholes that lead to loss, and we can map a path around to the win. And so that's been a big part of our strategy for years and how I do things. So
that's awesome, man. I love it too when the curveballs get thrown in, because you try to strategize, and I'm good the same way, where I'm able to see lots of different forks in the road. But then when something comes, one of those potholes that you're talking about that you don't anticipate, I'm like, awesome. Let's see how this thing plays out. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Didn't see that one coming. Wow. Cool. I love it. I love it too when people behave very uncharacteristically, and especially in a negotiation or a transaction, and you realize how outside their comfort zone they are, because I love watching their own growth through that process.
It's so fun, isn't it?
It is. It is.
I love that. Anybody that works for me that's in any kind of coaching, and I, of course, as a leader, you coach your team. But then I invest in coaches outside the organization too, for key people. And I love just sitting back and watching the struggle, because it's like, yeah, I was there, 3 years ago, and now I get to watch it. It's almost like I get extremely gratified and fulfilled from being able to watch the struggle that I've put other people in, because I know I can already see their potential on the other side. It's so incredible, man. It's amazing.
Success is always on the opposite side of adversity, not on the front side of it.
Yeah, for sure. It's so fulfilling, man. And then that just pumps us up even more to push ourselves, because when we see us creating uncomfortability for everyone else around us that's on our team that works for us, or a partner, then at that point we can say, cool, where can I push myself even further? How can I be better for these individuals who have now just gone through this incredible growth phase in their life? That means I got to step it up too. I got to keep rolling. Yep.
Absolutely.
That's awesome, man. So that was an amazing story. I mean, we just ate up 20 minutes just talking about some awesomeness there. Yeah. It's interesting. I was looking around and looking at your background, like that looks like an auto dealership, but it's a great story behind that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's a massive dealership. I have two buildings on 12 and a half acres here. It's a good deal. We without it sounding too Charlie, my brand strategist said, you got to be real careful how you deliver that message. And I'm like, okay. It's just like, because it'll sound real goody. And I'm like, oh, okay. Well, so this one, this was a client, right? So these were clients. Lithia Group is a huge publicly traded auto group, and they were clients of ours at one of my software companies. And they shut down like 17 stores, made some really, really smart moves, were able to write off a couple $100 million. And then they went and leveraged that to return a higher than expected quarterly earnings per share. They did a lot of really smart, raised another 400 million from the market, went and borrowed $1 billion, with 30% down, and bought a whole nother 17 store group that was way superior to the 17 that they closed or whatever. And then they took the other 100 million and borrowed 400 million and went and bought 12 more. So I'm just watching and learning. I'm like, man, that's a master's class.
It really is.
How to leverage it. Right. But the unfortunate side effect was they did it in March of 2020, right as the pandemic began. And 72 people lost their jobs at this particular facility. And it was, I knew some of the management team that was here because I'd obviously worked with them. Our companies had worked with them. And I'd worked with one of them for the better part of 7 years. And Brian is his name. And Brian and Terry are just really great, salt of the earth guys, just trying to provide for their families and stuff. And 8 months later, still no work.
Wow.
And we had some conversations, and the opportunity came, for me to look at the deal. And so I looked at it and didn't think it was going to be able to happen because Nissan said it couldn't happen, So we were able to put it back together. But when my wife and I talked about it, we can make money, any day. We see making money as part of the byproduct of the process that we run on a daily basis. But getting to save jobs is not something that we get to do every day.
You got it, brother. Yeah.
And so we've put 42 people back to work so far. And by the time I'm done, I'll have 70 plus, if not more, at this particular facility. My wife did a similar thing with her company, BrandLink. There was an agency that was a client of ours at the software company. They were a channel partner, as we call them. And they were inside of a public shell, and the public shell decided to sever the division. And, 30 some odd people on New Year's Eve found out that there was no job on New Year's Day.
Wow.
And so we actually forwent our New Year's Eve 2019 and structured a deal to hire 100% of that staff and roll them up into her company. And so a lot of times it's not just about making the money. It's about, the impact you can have. I know that you're real big into impact investing as well.
For sure. Yeah. We just had Sir Ronald Cohen on just a couple minutes ago, literally. And
I just spent time in a room with him the other day on Clubhouse.
Nice. Yeah. Same here. Yeah. We were probably in the same room. I bet you.
Probably were.
Yeah. No joke. But yeah, it was pretty great because just talking about that and how it's incredible to see that the shift of banks and everything else is really going towards the realm of impact. Even when you're talking, with the 30% down and the debt financing, banks are more likely now to even finance in this economic turmoil that we have when there's legitimate impact. Because now the bank can chalk that up on the board and say, hey, look at the difference we're making in people's lives. So when you put 42 people back to work or whatever it is, or hiring on another 30 after that point, that's really what they're diving into.
Very much so.
I love that. So it's not just about making money, because the money comes after the fact. We can make money at pretty much anything that we do. But you said, man, the ability to save jobs or create jobs is something that's just incredible that you necessarily don't get to do every day.
Yeah. And this comes down to kind of the root of entrepreneurship as a whole, right? It's what's the purpose? It's not to remain a small business owner. So many people think, I just want to stay small. I want to stay controlled. I want to keep it. I want to scale it to see how a lot of people too will scale a business to a lifestyle, right? They'll scale it to a specific lifestyle that sustains the lifestyle that they want. I scale stuff. I scale it to see how big it can possibly get.
Right on. Yeah, for sure.
And I think that's a huge, difference in the mindset.
And then your wife comes around and just says, is this all we have for us? As soon as you get to that.
Is this enough?
I love it, man. That's awesome. Man, you had a partner bail a little while back in a scenario, right? What happened with that?
My wife and I have been together 23 years, been in business together 23 years. And in 23 years, I'd never done a business transaction that my wife didn't fully support. But I'm a nerd. And I was never one of the cool kids, and I had a situation where I had some health issues, weighed just over 300 pounds, and really was battling with food addiction and utilizing food as a means for complex stress relief is a good way to put it. And I ended up meeting a guy that was, I'd backed into the auto industry from the vendor side, from the technology side. I built a massive database We, to this day, we're the second largest consumer database in the U.S. Our identity graph spans, over 300 million U.S. consumers, 220 million unique households. I have an email archive, 15-year email archive on 170 million plus of those individuals. Have all of that, hashed into SHA-256, SHA-1, and MD5 hashes so that you can go and target them across different custom audience targeting, whether that be a DSP side or at Facebook or Google or LiveRamp or wherever it is you might want to be. And so as I kind of backed into that, a guy calls me out of the blue and says, you keep taking all our customers. I want to understand what makes your product better than my product. And I said, well, your product's Fugazi. It's vapor. It's not real. And he goes, oh, we got the best product on the market. And I was like, no, you have an ugly baby. You just think that it's, the pageant queen, but it's not. It's, it's definitely got its flaws. Well, you can't back that. You can't validate that. I said, sure, I can. Let me hop into your servers and I'll tell you exactly who's doing the parts and pieces that you think are being done. And then I'll show you the servers in Tel Aviv and in Hong Kong, where they're really going out and buying nefarious clicks and using bots and things to drive non-human traffic. And then that leads to, you manipulating or them manipulating the Google Analytics UTM tags to say that it's what you say that you're doing, but you're not doing it. And that's why there's no real value behind what you're doing. And he goes, oh, no, that's not real. I was like, okay, well, just ask your vendor partner, because I know who you're outsourcing to. Ask your vendor partner these questions. So long story short, fast forward, a few months, guy calls me back, says, Mead, everything you said was going to happen. What am I going to do? And I was like, I don't know what you're going to do. And I had gone through a medical situation the day before. I thought I had a heart attack and went over and had an EKG done and a bunch of stuff. And turned out my thyroid had shut down because of my weight and my gallbladder was all jacked up. And so there were some things. And I just didn't feel like talking to him. I was like, I'm not going to solve your problem. There's no benefit in me solving your problem. I'm just going to stick to my problems right now. And he proceeded to say, well, what's wrong with you? You're not your normal gregarious self from our previous conversation. I was like, I'm going through some stuff. And he goes, well, tell me about it. And I'm like, I don't even know you. I've never met you. This is the second phone call we've ever had. I'm not going to tell you about my personal life. And he goes, what's the matter? You got the cancer? You got the AIDS? Like, what's wrong? And I'm like, no, it's nothing like that. And he goes, well, then what the hell do you care if I know? Tell me, I started telling this guy. And it was the craziest thing. I'm sitting there and I'm explaining the situation. And I was like, but it's okay. They told me there's this pill. I could take this Synthroid, whatever. And he says, hey, have you taken that first pill yet? And I was like, no, I'm still trying to decide what course I'm going to go, if I'm going to try and do something different. He goes, if you'll give me an hour, I will explain exactly what's going on in your body and why you don't need to take that pill and how you can fix this problem. And I'm thinking to myself, this guy's either about to sell me Amway or religion.
Yeah, no kidding, right? He's already sold you to tell him what's up.
Yeah. And I'm just about to brush him off. And I hear a kid in the background go, Daddy, you promised to take me for a bike ride. And I hear this guy go, son, you're right. But right now I need to save this man's life. Can you be patient for me? And I'm thinking in my head, this dude's either totally demented or he knows what he's talking about, because nobody would say that to their kid. So I spend the next hour listening to him map out what was back then. It wasn't called keto, right? And turns out before he got into the auto space that we had connected through, he ran a chain of medical weight loss facilities and a publicly traded thing. And the guy was an absolute brilliant, person, and told me exactly what to do, exactly how to do it. And I thanked him for his time, went ahead and went forward and decided I'm going to do what the guy says. I don't talk to him again for, 3 months. I get down 20 pounds, get down 30 pounds, anybody who's done, that type of, ketonic state, type meal, carb restrictive diet knows how fast it can come off once you realize that your body can only burn two things, fat or carbohydrates for energy. And so for me, it was very it was just very quantifiable. He's like, you're a nerd. You need data, right? And I'm like, cool. I'm going to give you all the data. And I was like, cool. So, I sat there and took copious notes and I did what he said. And so about 40 pounds down, I called the guy. I said, hey, listen, I'm down 40 pounds. I want to fly down to Florida and I just want to hug your neck, man. I truly feel like you did what you said. I never thought I'd get the weight back off. I never thought I'd get control of the eating and everything else. And so I flew down there, met him, and these dudes are, the epitome of sales guys. They're cool, man. They're slick, and here I am, this nerd, that just builds some businesses and stuff. And I get down there to Florida and I said, listen, I just wanted to say thank you. And I want to tell you, I owe you a favor. So what is it, that I can do for you in return? He says, come fix my ugly baby. Okay. So for the next 3-4 months, I work on, helping them put systems in place. It was a mess. The epitome of, bootstrap street hustlers. Every employee was 1099, yet they told them when to show up. Everything you can think that you could do wrong in setting up a business, these guys had done it, man. But they were super cool. And the reality is I was super appreciative and I continued to lose weight, lost over 100 pounds and over the course of time. And so I ended up in a situation where my wife said, hey, you remember you're doing all that for free, right? And I get that, and I'm happy, that you're losing the weight and I get all that, but you either need to get back to work on your business and making sure that our future is secured, or you need to go, buy that company or do something. If you're going to put them aside, you need to own it. And I'm like, so I call him up and I said, hey, listen, I'm not, I can't keep, spending so much time on this. I got to go work on my own company and grow it and stuff. My wife said I've either got to, go back to doing our stuff or I got to come, I got to come by your company. He goes, what are you waiting on? Get on the plane. Come on. He goes, I don't know how you've changed everything. I don't know how to do what you're doing. How would we do it? And so I fly down, we strike an initial deal for 40%. Time progresses. My wife and I decide we don't want to stay in the deal. We did a 6-month test, and we decided, it's a good deal. They're good business partners, but I want to keep building my data company. I want to keep building the back end of what I'm doing. And so we decided we're going to, sever and part ways. And they're like, dude, if you do that, the whole thing shuts down. We have no clue how to run a company the way that you built all this infrastructure and these systems. And so I proceeded to take controlling interest. We took 60% stake and put together a proper advisory board, did all the things, built it, grew it from, 2.3 million to 5 million and some change over the next 18 months. And one day I get a phone call, and I'll just preface this by saying, that business transaction took my wife and I, from that 700-800 range to, over 1 million, net take home, type, or, kind of for the first time. Right. And of getting to that level, we had always been successful, but always, and I openly admit that I spent my first 14 years, even though we were entrepreneurs, it was a very irresponsible entrepreneur. And I have a book coming out called Irresponsible Entrepreneurship, which is about that 14-year journey and all of the stuff I had to learn from year 14 to year 23 that nobody teaches, right? That it's all the stuff, from understanding the tax laws and the tax codes, understanding, all these different parts and pieces. It was just understanding how all that ties together has led to a very focused mindset towards responsible entrepreneurship and to profiting from your expenses, which is a really big part of it. And so, but with that particular deal, I hop on the board call and these guys have decided that my lion's share is too much now that I've grown it and theirs is too small. So they want out of the deal. And they're the sales organization and I'm all the fulfillment. So long story short, it was a very tumultuous time. It was a very complex situation because as we did that and separated, there was an agreement that they would continue to utilize us. And so it wouldn't really affect cash flow and all these other things. And of course, my initial response, by the way, Rick, was no, sorry. I'm sorry you don't like your deal. but we made a deal, and the deal's the deal, and I have all the voting rights. So, like, no, I'm not going to, why would I unwind a great deal for me? He said, well, listen, hey, if you don't want to, no problem. As the operating partners here, we're going to fire all the staff tomorrow morning, and we're just going to stop working.
Wow. He had the leverage on you then in that realm.
Well, they controlled the revenue.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. On the sales side.
And so the sales side. And I said, you wouldn't do that. And they were like, consider it done. They didn't care. I was like, I will file an injunction. I will do all the different things that our contracts like. Okay, cool. And we'll battle that out for 2 years in court. Nobody will win except the attorneys. So no problem. In the meantime, we're going to go down the road, open a new office, hire all the same people back, put them to work under our new shingle, under our new umbrella. And we're going to take all the customers with us, and there's nothing you can do. So I learned a lot about contract law.
Yeah, you did. My God, man.
And so we literally went from, million plus to zero to using the 250 reserve that we swore we would never touch. So now we're negative 250 while I had to rebuild the entire infrastructure of the company and get to a place where I was 30 days away from launching the new product and being able to go rebuild it all. And we were flat broke. We were negative 250. We'd gone through every penny that we had available to us, my wife and I. And I went to an advisory board, person that I knew. His name's Dave Watt. And Dave is a 70-something-year-old investment banker guy who built an $8 billion company. And I said, Dave, I need 40 grand. I got to be able to pay my house note, and I got to be able to pay the staff. Not one person lost their job, by the way, during this whole process. We kept every single person employed that we had on our staff. That was important to us because we had several single moms on our staff at that time. And we just did not want to, we did not want that to be the legacy that, of that particular journey that we were on. And so he said, I'm going to give you the 40 grand. Your company's basically defunct. There's nothing to invest in. So I'm investing in you and in my belief that you're going to actually pull this off, but it's going to cost you 10% on the money, and it's going to cost you 10% of your company. Not just this one, every one you build in the future.
My God.
Talk about a VIG.
Yeah, no kidding.
Talk about a price tag. But I knew I just needed that 30 days. And I knew what I was building, and I knew what it was capable of. And so that's the story of how, that deal went south from a partnership standpoint. What I thought was the worst thing that had ever happened to me by far is the greatest thing that ever happened to me, because on the other side of adversity is where all the growth happened. And I took that 40 grand and parlayed that into that particular company has done over $4.5 billion in retail sales over the last 36 months. And that's resulted in us servicing thousands of clients with that particular software that I finished. And it's resulted in over $350 million worth of verified client dealer profits. And it's resulted in, my wife and I being able to build a portfolio that's worth over 100 million now and do the things that we've been able to do. And then ultimately now we're at a stage where we're taking that money and investing in companies with founders and principals that are, like this project. I won't run this project long term. Long term, the plan will be that I'll turn it over to these guys that I helped now secure their future and reach a place of stability. I'll get it to the place of stability. They have to figure out how to get it to the place of significance. And so as we look at this whole process, and one of the requirements and criteria that we have is you have to be willing to take a percentage of the equity from the business and put it down to a foundation that is then going to ultimately effectuate impact, not just in a global capacity, right? We're real big with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, the 2030 agenda, and really trying to focus and understand the impact. And you just had a conversation with a great guy that knows a tremendous amount about that. And And so, but also in the local communities, what can we do in the communities? How many more jobs can we create? Because I don't believe that our elected officials, and whether that be local, state, or federal, are going to solve some of the biggest issues that are facing our communities. I believe entrepreneurs will. And I think that as an investor and as a true entrepreneur who understands all the multiple facets that are involved in being an entrepreneur, it's your fiduciary and ethical responsibility to make sure that you understand the entire vision of what it is that you're building and how every decision you make and every move you make impacts those around you and the people that are entrusting their livelihood with your vision. And so anyway, that's the story of how we got from, losing, literally building everything up over a 16, 18 year period to losing it, to rebuilding it again. And I will tell you, the journey on the second half has been much funner than the journey on
no doubt. From minus 250,000 in the hole to 4.5 billion in revenue. That's incredible. And you mentioned something too that I was going to talk to you about as we wrap up here, the 4 stages of entrepreneurship. And you talked about, when the dealership that you're in right now, going from stage 3 to 4, from being stabilized, which you're stabilizing them now, but then going to a place of significance. That's incredible. I love the first one too, that's on there, being smart enough to get into business. It comes back to that fear stuff that we were talking about, right? And how many actually have the balls to go out and do it?
Yeah. And there's a lot, right? And the unfortunate part is they're smart enough to get into business, but they don't progress to and then maybe they make it to stage 2 where they're successful enough to make a little bit of money, but then
that's
they never
lifestyle. Yeah.
They scale to a lifestyle and they build themselves a job, right? So whether that's a gig economy worker, a solopreneur, a entrepreneur, whatever you want to call it, and that's the reason that the statistic is, somewhere north of 80% of all businesses fail within the first 5 years. And only, what's the statistic? 1% or 1% of all the businesses ever see $1 million. And of that, only 7% ever see $10 million. It's very interesting to me watching, how entrepreneurialism is perceived and distorted and misinterpreted inside of this socially driven ecosystem that we're watching. An entrepreneur is somebody who has enough vision to create something great while taking great risk themselves, at typically, a huge risk of financial loss. But I heard someone say recently that an entrepreneur is in essence a liar at their core, because they take something that has never existed and breathes it into life, right? And speaks it into life. And I thought those are very interesting viewpoint. I don't know that I 100% agree with it, but the concept, I understand the logic behind it. In our heads, in your head, the idea and the concept makes total sense. You can do it. Everyone around you is like, oh, you're a liar. That's never going to happen.
That's not true. It hasn't happened. And you're like, well, it's not true yet. It will be 6 months from now, 18 months from now.
Right. And so it's super interesting. So yeah, the 4 stages of entrepreneurialism as I see them are, you're smart enough to get in business. Then you're successful enough to make a little bit of money. And then you stabilize the business where you're working on it versus in it. And that's kind of that critical phase where you've created something that's, somewhat sustainable for lengths of time. Maybe you can even function as an absentee owner. You don't have to be there 100% of the time. You've created that, that quality of life. But the interesting part about the rest of it is that you end up at level 4, which I'll openly admit, I'm at level 3 across all my companies. And I'm on a mad mission right now to comprehend and understand what it means to get to a place of significance. Because significance means I'm completely responsible for every single aspect. And I comprehend that responsibility to the point where I understand I must have a succession plan, that my time on this planet is finite, and that all of these people will be impacted if I drop dead tomorrow of a heart attack. And so I'm taking serious my health. I'm taking serious all of the different things that have to be done. More importantly, I understand that my wife needs to understand and know all the moving parts so she's not left reeling trying to figure out how all of this chaos that's in my head worked in the physical world if I leave the physical world. And so there's a lot of things that come down to, especially if you've built businesses and things that rely on impact. And so if you're making impact in communities, now you've got all these other people that you're responsible for. And so reaching a place of significance as an entrepreneur, to me, is the pinnacle. I've got a succession plan in place. I understand my tax strategies. I understand exactly how we're making an impact on the communities that we're serving, on the client base that we're serving, and in the world as a whole. I understand, all of the succession plans that need to be in place. I myself personally, once a week, I sit down on Sunday mornings and I record a video just like we're recording right now. And I put it into a Dropbox, and my wife knows if I drop dead tomorrow, she goes to the Dropbox and everything she needs to know is in a series of videos, exactly where we are. She starts with the latest one and goes backwards in time. And from the latest one, I give her all the updates of how everything has changed from the previous video, from the video before that, from the video before that, because I have a responsibility as a husband, as a father, and as a business owner and an entrepreneur to not just her and my family, but to all the other families that chose to entrust their livelihood with my vision and my journey and my path. And so for me, I'm still working on going from 3 to 4. But once I reach 4, man, I got to tell you, I will feel as though my journey had some purpose behind it. So
that's awesome, brother. Matt, I really appreciate the conversation, man. You've inspired me today. And for everyone listening, mattmead.com, MEAD, no E. And Instagram and Facebook is Matt Mead Official. Brother, thanks for lifting up everybody who's listened today, and keep going. 100 million? Come on, that's not enough. Is that all you got?
is that the limit of our ability together, Rick? Come on, man. I love it.
Thanks, brother.
I love it. Well, thanks for the time, man. And I'd love to do this again because I really didn't get to hear anything about your journey. I want to learn a little more about what you got going on.
You got it. What's shaking? Thank you for joining me on the All In Podcast. Click the subscribe button and smash that bell for notifications. Text me, 312-535-8520. Follow me on social media at Mr. Rick Jordan. See you next episode. I am Rick Jordan, and I approve this message.